I will try not to talk as much about it just because you already kind of talked about it at length, but this is the first time I rewatched it since I saw it, I think, in high school. It has to have been like 6 years ago. Maybe like almost exactly, because
I'm trying to think, because didn't maybe it wasn't us, but I swear I saw it at like the Castro in like a film print version. It wasn't us? Did we
it wasn't me and you. I remember you
Okay.
went to see some Halloween films at the Castro, but
yeah,
it was
I saw
Evil
Halloween
Dead. I remember.
Yeah, The Shining wasn't in that run, but I'm pretty maybe it was me and Brad who saw like a 35. It might not have been the Castro either. It could have been like the Alamo or I mean, there's a bunch of theaters that does it. So
well, I I keep track of stuff. I'm quite sure I have not watched it since what I think I saw it on Halloween or like a day or two away from Halloween in senior year with like all my friends at the PFA in Berkeley.
Oh yeah.
Full audience, just the
That's
perfect
great.
way to see the movie. Let's see. We were just like briefly talked about The Shining, right? I think
we haven't even started into it, but
like we just said, like I think I just said something about the movie being kind of plotless, not plotless, but simple.
yes.
It doesn't really it's very, very straightforward, and I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be like the person sitting here and saying The Shining isn't great, because it really is, and this is not like a situation like the way I feel about 2001, where I find it very underwhelming. But I don't. It's just one of those things where sometimes I watch a movie and I think, wow, this is utterly brilliant in its craftsmanship, but it doesn't have like this. If I watched it now, I don't think I would say there's that something extra that pushes it into being like a great movie. But I don't know. Maybe that's just kind of an ignorant opinion. I don't know. I mean, clearly you really like this movie a lot.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I completely agree that it's a simple concept and a simple story. Although in some ways I kind of find that that's like its charm. In that I guess in contrast, I don't want to necessarily talk about Dr. Sleep before we're ready, but in contrast to Dr. Sleep, I feel like that movie is a much more broad movie in the way that it has so many different characters and so many different things that it's trying to do and say and blah blah blah. Whereas The Shining is very much a simple story based around a couple of characters in one location, and that's it. And there's a distillation in that process. There's like a refinement in that it's able to extract what's interesting about that story and leave all of the boring bits behind, but take everything that's really interesting and moody and intriguing about that kind of concept. And so like that really is where the craftsmanship comes out, is because there's a there's not that many people who can do that to a very simple story. And so like when you can do it, there's a lot of filmmakers, like let's take Peter Jackson for example. A lot of filmmakers can take a primary source and make it interesting, an expansive primary source, and make it an interesting story out of it. You could take The Lord of the Rings and make it into an interesting couple of movies, but not a lot of filmmakers can take a simple story and distill it down and find what's really great about it.
No, it's not inherently like
into a movie
grand and epic in the same way as something like Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter, something that is more obviously cinematic. And in some ways, based on the very little I've read about because I haven't read the Shining book, but from what I've read about the synopsis, is he simplified things a lot. I mean, Stephen King
Sure.
was, by every account, pretty unhappy with how
Yeah.
the movie turned out, and in some ways, it seems like Flanagan kind of went back and tried to do some of the things that Kubrick didn't do, at least
Yeah,
based on what I know about it.
that's what it seems like. And I'm not super familiar. I haven't read any Stephen King books, and I've only seen a handful of his movies based on his his books. But it does seem like the Flanagan movie is much more of a Stephen King adaptation than The Shining. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like The Shining is something that you look at as a Stanley Kubrick movie, and then a Stephen King book second. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like the film, because it has such a. I mean, it does have such a legacy, as well as such a an artist's imprint on that that source. Like, I think the fact that Kubrick made that movie, it turned it into a Kubrick property,
No, that's definitely a good way of thinking about it. Yeah.
Which is potentially why Stephen King didn't like it. Like it's potentially the fact that he saw that almost there was greatness in the distillation of his work that was completely separate from what he had put into it. And so, like, I haven't seen, or I haven't read the book, so I could be completely off base here, but from what I gather, it's like it seems like he's a little bit miffed that Kubrick like stole his thunder in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And stripped away everything. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, although the thing that kind of bothers me about that idea is that sometimes those are really the best adaptations of books, when you're able to take maybe the core concept, or maybe the thrust of the movie, and make it completely different. Like,
no, that's very true. Yeah.
I guess it's totally not the same at all, because this is a children's book, but something like Where the Wild Things Are is like a great example of taking an original concept and making it unique and interesting for the medium.
I think another example that also are many great biopics, which take a real life story, and I think for my money, most of the best ones just sort of take the kernel of the idea and then spin it off into something that usually resembles the literal truth very little, especially things like Amadeus or The Social Network, I'm thinking of in particular.
Yeah.
So I think this is an example of that,
and
in literary form.
I guess the problem with that, and I understand like why people might be off put by that, is like, I think people very often like drill it into their head that like, yeah, but that's not like what actually happened, or like, yeah, but that's not like the truth, maybe. Whereas I think you and I both have you maybe more so than I, because there's some times where I'm like, oh, man, that sucks that like some of this core concept wasn't considered or wasn't taken. But I think we both have a broader acceptance of how things can be adapted, in that you really don't have to stay true to the material in a literal sense. And
No,
in fact, there's some ways that it's much more interesting when you deviate it, and when you take your own spin on things. And
no,
so,
it's very true, and that is true. A lot of people tend to be very dogmatic about these things when it comes to both their favorite literature and real life events. Where I know people who it's like, oh, they changed the book so much, or they changed the real story so much, it just puts them off the thing completely, even if it's something really great. And it doesn't tend to bother me that much. But I don't know. So to quickly just, I feel like maybe we should just. I'm more interested in talking about Doctor Sleep because I just watched it and
Yeah.
I'm more curious about your opinion. But just to cover any of my thoughts watching The Shining, stray thoughts, I was struck by how he inserts the eeriness of the story even in the most mundane expository scenes at the beginning of the movie.
Completely.
Because like that scene in the office is the most functional scene. And I also felt like, and I don't know if this is in my head, but I felt like there was almost an intentional, like he was directing all the actors, or maybe it's just that's the way they act in Kubrick movies, but they're all sort of acting in this way that seems slightly artificial and slightly, the way I describe it is almost like it's like the uncanny valley, but in terms of like performance rather than like face and, you know, robotics, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
100%.
it seems like it's very, very close to reality, but it's not quite. And so when they're talking in the office about, you know, his gig or whatever, before they're even talking about the creepier aspects of the hotel, already it's just, and the rhythm of the shots. I mean, it's just such great. I mean, this is not a groundbreaking idea that Stanley Kubrick, great director, but like his the command of when to cut. I noticed there's a lot of scenes where he holds on the people, like the cut is always exactly on the line, you know. So it's very
exactly.
almost stilted, but it's something about it is alarming. He saves the close-ups too, where he'll play out a scene, particularly and that scene in the bathroom, which I think is my favorite scene in the movie. You know what I'm talking about with the butler?
Yeah, 100%. That was Isaac's favorite scene in the movie.
Oh my
too.
god!
Yeah,
That whole
it's
scene.
fantastic. Well, what I said was I was watching that movie and Brad randomly came in for some reason.
Right.
Like he just peeked his head in my room, and he literally ended up staying for the whole entire scene because it really is just a captivating scene. I mean, literally every single part and every single moment of that scene draws you in a way that is so deeply uncomfortable and really rich and rewarding, you know. Like it feels, it's the first time you kind of feel like you're getting some answers, but it's also opening the door as far as like the narrative goes to so many more questions. And the mood and the tone, the shots where he's purposefully making you uncomfortable,
Flipping the 180 degree rule.
Yeah,
right?
there's just like, it's just everything about it is so perfect. I mean, honestly, it might be Kubrick at his most Kubrickian.
I mean, it's in the Hall of Fame of his, like any of the great scenes he's ever done, I would say. And I realize I think I may have misremembered the scene in some ways because of how chilling. There's a turn in the scene where it seems like a very polite interaction, and then he goes into those close-ups, and that guy Philip Stone, who is incredible in that scene.
Yeah.
It's like
just
he
one
goes,
scene.
Yeah, he goes just from completely genteel and polite, oh sir, you know, and then to just absolutely. I mean, I think he might be even more scary than Nicholson in that scene. Just the way that hard stare where he's looking at him. But I think I remembered it as the music went away when it turns for the more sinister, but it doesn't. And so it's almost like I remembered, it was so chilling, that turn, that I thought of it as all the sound dropped out, but it's actually not. It was just so powerful that it's like, that's how my memory had stored it away for 6 years. But nonetheless, and let alone just also, it's one of the most coolest looking bathrooms I can think of in a movie.
I know. It's so weird.
Yeah. It's just great.
And I guess that's kind of one of the reasons why I say, like, sure, yeah, the story, like, I don't know. I feel like if you look at this movie in the narrative sense, you're really giving it a disservice because that scene doesn't really do a lot. Like I think that scene doesn't, like, if you're looking for explanation in the entire movie, I think like
No, it's a
I don't know where to
foolhardy
point you.
enterprise.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no. I mean, you're not going to enjoy it. It has to be enjoyed just purely as a dreamlike experience.
Yeah, and so like that's why I was so impressed with it watching it again with how like imaginative it really is. It's very much um a movie that leaves you wishing that you knew what the answer was and thinking about, oh, what do all these things mean? What is the purpose to all these scenes? And part of it obviously is I would say most of it doesn't have an answer, and Kubrick is smart enough to uh, have things be in there that are complete red herrings.
Yeah, I think I would doubt that he was really making this movie with a so-called deeper meaning in mind. I mean, I think the movie has ideas in it. It's not just
100%.
nonsense, but I think a lot when I go on Wikipedia, I read the analysis of this stuff. Like I'm sure it's entertaining to read some of this, like the moon landing and the Native American claptrap. But
it's
like
so funny, yeah.
it's fun. It is funny, but I think it's also I don't like to me it's it is such an absurd thing to take away from the movie. I would say.
But hold on. But that's one of the reasons why I think the movie is so brilliant, because you are completely capable of reading all of these things into it. You're completely capable of taking away a different thing from your neighbor. Like anyone who watches this movie is gonna have a different imagination of what it's saying, what it's talking about, who Jack is, who what the hotel means, and so like there's so many of these completely, I mean, I call them red herrings, but it could be your reason to believe in one reading or another. So like
but my thing is when I read, I mean that is true that there's a multitude of analysis that this movie lends itself to, but when you read what people this is not intelligent analysis is what I'm saying, is when I'm reading these things, because this is, and in many ways I feel like this is a way a lot of people look at a lot of especially horror movies, where it's like they're looking for Easter eggs and they're looking for like, they're not really reading into what the movie is saying or what the ideas are being expressed by the movie. They're just noticing details of the movie and then just taking that detail and extrapolating it into the movie being about this.
Yeah.
Which the Native American thing,
the people who are like talking about the moon landing, yeah, obviously, but
the moon landing thing is the most absurd, because it's like the idea that he is subtextually trying to tell you
funny.
this, but the way he's subtextually telling you this is having the kid literally wear an Apollo 11 shirt is one of the most stupid analyses of any work of art I've ever heard.
It's just so funny.
I mean, no, it's funny as it's embarrassing, but it's ludicrous. The Native American thing, I mean, I don't know. Again, that just seems like a very surface level. Like they see the Native American imagery and they comment on it. I mean, I think it does fit into the idea of like there is a spiritual evil that it comes from the history of this place. Like I think that's fair, but I don't know. When people seem to just read into it just based on they see Native American designs on the wall and they go, oh, that's the theme of the movie. I'm like, okay, but
yeah, I don't know. I obviously I don't have a lot of respect for those like dumb theories, and that's kind of why we look at that. Most people look at them and say like, oh, that's dumb and ridiculous. But I think obviously there's a complete lack of I guess one of the things that is most different from Dr. Sleep is that there's a complete lack of rules in the movie. So you don't know what, you have no idea what these visions that these people are seeing are from. You don't know if it's because of the, maybe it's because of the Native American burial ground that it's built on, or maybe it's because of the, maybe there are ghosts in the building, or maybe, who knows, or maybe it's just a premonition from that. So like, it's like that is what I really find most fascinating about the movie, is that all of these things are true. It just is up to your own sort of take on things, and so like that's why I have no particular opinion on the literal meaning of what all of these things are. I think it's interesting to talk about potentially, but for the most part, I just think it's kind of it's almost redundant talking about it, because there is no purpose to...
Well, it's not only redundant because I think it's impossible, and I don't think it was Kubrick's intention for you to say, well, this stems from this and this means this. But I think also, in some ways, I think my negative response to analysis of The Shining in particular is just because the mysteriousness of it to me is like the whole point, and it is the effectiveness of the movie, is the fact that you're watching it and these things happen, and they, the fact that life is horrifying and unknowable, and it makes absolutely no sense, and there's random senseless violence, and also even things like, which I'm not sure if I could say as a criticism in a different movie, but in a way it's kind of like horrifying in its own way, is just the thing of Kubrick really sets up the feeling, even though I've seen the movie, I know it happens, but he sets up the feeling that Scatman Crothers is going to come rescue them, or he's going to come help them in some way. And he focuses like a surprising amount of time on him in the movie. And it's like, it just doesn't go that way at all. And I mean, I guess he helps them in that he brings the working snowmobile, but the point being, you do not get the wonderful moment of catharsis that maybe you get in like, well, like actually, I was thinking about Get Out. Like, what would it be like if Lil Rel Howery showed up at the end of Get Out and then just gets fucking murdered?
Just gets murdered by an axe,
which would suck, by the way. Like, I love the ending of Get Out.
I think it's great.
But in this case, I mean, I don't know. I sort of, in some ways, I do wish like his part was more interesting, or there was something more interesting than just dying immediately. But the pure headlong kind of plunge into just senseless chaos and horror is part of the movie's effectiveness. I just wish, I think absolutely. What is the issue with this movie, and I don't want to say with Kubrick in general, because I haven't seen all of his movies, but it's the case with some of his movies, is that I think he's not really interested in people or character in a way that I tend to enjoy in other horror movies more, like he sees them essentially as, I don't know, almost like chess pieces, and that's entertaining for this movie. But it doesn't bring it to that place of, I don't know. Honestly, I don't want to say like I like the Jordan Peele movies more, because like Kubrick obviously is like one of the greatest filmmakers, but I think I will say I enjoy movies like that more, or Hereditary, or Carrie, or even like Candyman, because those movies are disturbing and compelling also, but they also have an interest in humans and human nature in a way that I think Kubrick doesn't in this movie.
I want to push back on that, because I don't. I think Kubrick, maybe we just share the same vision of humanity, but I think Kubrick has a very it's not even that people are pawns or like chess pieces in the character. I think it just has a very cynical view of what human nature is, and and it's potentially that he has his movies are a little bit too cynical. They're focused a little bit too much on the negative aspect of human nature.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is probably why some people are off put by his films, in the way that they think they're cold, or I guess, I mean, they are cold, but I think why specifically The Shining is interesting, and actually I would say that it's the case for Clockwork Orange, a lot as well, is that The Shining is very much focused on, and this is what I brought up at the end of the podcast, in that I don't think the narrative explanation of the movie is all that important, but I think the analysis in terms of what Kubrick is talking about with human nature is actually pretty important. And he talks about, I think the movie is entirely about sort of the persona that you present, and the deep anguish and evil that everyone has inside of them, that everybody's willing to let out at some point. But and taken so far, everyone is capable of letting that sort of unleash, push to a certain brink. And so I think that I think The Shining is very much it is psychological in the way that it's touching very much on something that is human and within us as part of human nature.
I think that's true. And I think now that I'm thinking about what I'm talking about, maybe my description of his characterization is probably more apt for something like 2001, where I think in that movie he really isn't interested in them at all as people. But now that I think of it, it's not entirely true, because there is a sense of him trying to hold back this kind of evil that's within him, and both Danny and what's the mother's name? Shelley Duvall, trying to.
I don't know. I always call her Shelley.
Yeah, I say Shelley Duvall. Trying to understand what's going on within him. I guess maybe what I mean more is just the fact that at a certain point the movie just becomes a chase, or just becomes a pure, like, sort of it is basically just him chasing them around. And that's not a criticism, because it's fantastic, and it's, I mean, I can't name how many great moments. I actually think a really great scene I kind of forgot about is when she locks him in the pantry. And I particularly love that shot of Nicholson from below, where you see him kind of like putting on this performance. And there's not enough good I could say about him in this movie. He's just amazing. But I also would say,
so is she.
I think she is really good too. I'm not sure if I said earlier, but I find it odd that you hear people saying she's not good in this movie, because
I don't get that at all. I mean,
I think she's good in the earlier part when she's more normal. I think in a way you can kind of see the kind of, like, it's not artificial, because it's actually the opposite of artificial, because Kubrick like provoked, I mean, I think very unethically in many ways, it sounds like, this sort of horror in her, but it's like it's a little bit, I don't know, you can see the sort of dissonance in the performance, where it's like you're seeing the seeping in of real life. I don't know, maybe it also could be just it makes me uneasy, because I think I really am not you can say how great the movie is or how great the performance is, but I think that's it's not something I can defend, what he did to her. So I don't know. I do feel kind of bad for her. I mean, I know this is outside of the text of the movie, but it is something that's kind of unpleasant about it. But in terms of the movie, and perhaps this is where I'm going to launch my perhaps unwise defense of Dr. Sleep, is in many ways I find that movie to be a much more interesting movie. as much as, and it really doesn't help to watch them back to back as I did. I watched Shining yesterday. I watched Doctor Sleep today.
Yeah.
And it really it does bring out the, how difficult it is when you're stepping into the ring with Stanley Kubrick as a filmmaker. But having said that, as much as I think the movie has flaws, I find the movie also is it's a much more affecting movie, like emotionally for me. It I think the interest in character in some ways is I don't want to say better done, but in The Shining there is sort of a sense, you never really get a sense of Nicholson being anything other than a creep in that movie, which I think is one of King's bigger complaints about it, if I'm not mistaken, is that it was more the idea was the hotel possesses him, but I don't know if he's a creep, but he's a very like unpleasant guy. Like his whole performance is
definitely
sarcastic. Like everything he says to his family has just this sense of disdain and sarcasm towards them before he starts going off the rails, Nicholson. But I thought the portrayal of sort of Ewan McGregor and his dealing with this sort of darkness within him and wrestling with that and his trauma of his past and all these sort of things was really well done in that movie. And I don't know. I can't really say whether I think it's a better movie, but I enjoyed it more. I think I have to say. I'm curious what you thought.
Yeah, well, I think I liked it. I'm definitely not like, I wouldn't say I'm as enthused by it as you are probably. I think a couple of the things that I really, really enjoyed about it was how I think character wise it does a lot to focus on sort of the more human elements of what these people are going through, and I think it's very good at establishing sort of the flawed nature of Danny as a character, especially in the beginning. I think those were something that I found most interesting in the movie was those early scenes of Danny, as sort of the terrible drunk that he is, and I think that gives a character that actually comes up later a lot. There's a couple scenes. There's that scene where he's talking. He's giving a speech at his AA meeting, which I think is really fantastic, as well as the scene where he's back in the hotel and he's talking to his dad, which I thought was really good too. Although I don't know, I kind of almost, again, I think probably watching it so close together gives it like an uphill challenge or uphill climb in a certain sense. For because sure. You see that scene originally in The Shining, and then you kind of see it remade in this movie, and it certainly fails to live up. And I'm not necessarily sure what they could have done to make that more of a like less. I don't know. I guess there are certain times in the movie where I did feel like drawn out of it, specifically because I felt like it was really heavily
referencing
the Shining in a way that made me not uncomfortable necessarily, but just made me like it reminded me that this was like a movie, like it reminded me.
I mean, it kind of feels a little bit of the things we know thing, and like some of those new Star Wars movies, I think.
In that way. And I guess the biggest thing to me that my biggest criticism of the movie is that I think it, in the way that it's trying to, in the positive way that it's trying to focus on sort of the more interesting aspects of these characters, it also leaves a lot I mean, it's such a broad movie, and there's so many different characters that it really leaves a lot to like it just doesn't fill me in the way that I was hoping for, and it kind of breezes past certain motivations and certain characters that I felt like would have really bolstered the movie. And in some ways I almost wish that this was a TV show in the weirdest way, because it's usually not something that I am looking for, but I almost felt like there's moments of the movie that I was like, oh wait hold on. Like that was a really emotional moment that was just like really swept past and breezed through, like when the dad dies. I think that's just like, that's, you spend like 30 seconds with that, and then and then it kind of just, okay, we got other things to get to,
Yeah, I'm curious how it plays in the director's cut that's a little bit longer, because there are definitely things in it where you feel like he really had a lot he wanted to put in it. And I had the exact same thought independent of you, that it would be I think I would have maybe liked it better as maybe a like a 6-episode miniseries, because there are also things like, I really like Cliff Curtis as his friend, but I felt like that's a relationship that definitely could have been had a more like fleshed out in a longer format, and probably other things as well that I'm maybe the girl's parents too, or the community of creeps who we'll get to, because oh my god. But yeah, there's just all these things that I think that it's true, and yeah, it's very interesting to watch it, and that is another thing where it definitely, when you hold it up against The Shining, it sort of is weaker in that regard, because Kubrick is so stripped down to just three people that he does not have any problem of that sort in any way. But it's very interesting to watch it, where when I saw it, I don't know when it came out last year, but I saw it in the theater. So this is like 5 years after, having seen The Shining. So it's not fresh in my mind at all, versus seeing it one day after seeing The Shining. And I think probably more than anything, it's the visual style and Kubrick's command of just the grammar of the film that I think probably, I don't want to say suffers, because it's not that it bothered me. It's just that you notice it more, because I think actually it's a very well crafted movie, and Flanagan is not like a Tom McCarthy, or like he's not like one of these directors where it's just shot boringly. Like I think it's a well shot movie, but I think just when you compare it to obviously The Shining, which is some of the best film cinematography of any movie, obviously it's going to fall down a bit. Now on the other hand, I will say I think that may also be a good thing, that he sort of forges his own style in the movie, because if he was really trying to imitate the way the movie looked and all those sort of things, I think it wouldn't really work. And on top of that, I think the style that Kubrick cultivates in The Shining would not be at all conducive to the story and the feeling of Dr. Sleep, because it's totally a much more naturalistic movie in terms of like character, I would say, and it's much more it's more intimate and like humane. There's more like heart in terms of characters sort of coming together. The sort of distant, omnipresent camera of The Shining would not fit well with those sort of intimate scenes in Dr. Sleep at all.
No, I totally agree. I don't think Dr. Sleep is a poorly shot movie at all. And I think it does a lot of things really well, and especially like I loved the sequence where the crazy the psycho lady,
Rebecca Ferguson,
yes, first like gets into the where the kid Abra sets the trap for the first time.
Oh yeah.
Like I love that sequence, and I think it's
Wait, are you
really.
talking about the supermarket or the where she flies through the
Oh no,
sky?
yeah, where she flies into the sky, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I just think like stylistically and visually, I think is just very, it's great. I think it really does a great job. I guess I don't know. I think that's sort of where his style ekes out the most in those sequences, and sort of it's also where it gets the most like, I guess like superhero movie-ish, like
No, there is a sense of little X-Men-ish quality to the movie.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I guess my biggest issue with the movie stylistically is like I just don't think a lot of the effects, a lot of the CG work wasn't that great. I didn't like how the hotel looked when they first came upon it. I thought it looked really bad. I thought all of the boxes in the anytime there was a shot of him in the boxes in the maze,
the boxes were a little CGI. I don't know if I would agree about the hotel. I thought all the hotel stuff, the arrival at the hotel was great. I definitely think they do probably like one too many like little references where you feel like it's like they kind of has to just do them because
once he's in the hotel, I think it's good. But I think the like when they're driving up, the facade of the hotel like just doesn't look I don't know, to me.
No, that too I was fine with, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It didn't look that like, I almost wish that they had just made a physical version of the hotel like they did in The Shining, like I just wish they kind of kept that.
I mean, yeah, you can't top the look. I mean, we didn't talk about that as much, but the immense craft of that in The Shining, the building of the exterior, the maze, and all the interior stuff, just beautiful.
So like that, I think there was a couple moments where I was like drawn out by the fact that it looked a little and again, it could just be the fact that I watched it so close together, but it just it didn't look quite as real as the original Shining, which is funny because talking about a movie made 40 years later. And
though oddly that's more the case. I find that the case even with older movies that I actually, The Thing is a great example of that, where it's exactly. When you look at that matte painting of the spaceship, it's not real. You can tell, but it just doesn't. I think in a way it is, again, the kind of the uncanny valley thing, where seeing something and just being able to accept it, but you appreciate the beauty of the craft is in some ways better than kind of trying to make something that looks realistic, like, maybe like the boxes in the maze or things like that, or some of the backgrounds of the movie, and it just doesn't. But I can't say those things bothered me too much. I mean, I think I've just kind of gotten used to it with a lot of modern movies too, because there's a lot of stuff where, people just have to make these compromises, and I'm not crazy about it. I'm not crazy about also, movies that are shot digitally. It's another one of those things where, like when you watch the new Twin Peaks, there's a lot of effects in that you would probably, if you were being like in the visual effects academy, you would say this is not super well done.
Oh, well, I mean, that's kind of why I get another reason why I think it would be a great miniseries or TV show or something is because like who cares about effects in TV shows? It's just basically it's just to serve a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So at a certain point, I don't care if it looks bad, whatever, it looks bad. It's fine, Obviously there's a certain level, a certain bar that you have to meet, but when you're watching a movie, you kind of have a different, or at least me, I have a different picture of what's acceptable almost. And
that's interesting. I wonder if that's more, because I don't really have that kind of differentiation, but that's an interesting thing, because I think probably a lot of people would probably fall into your category more so because I think I'm maybe a little strange in my, I basically watch TV as if they're movies, like if I start a season of TV, even if I hate it, I watch the whole thing because it's like, oh, if I start a movie, I watch the whole thing.
Oh God, no, I
So
can't.
I'm like, oh, I'll watch, but I see it in both formats. I see it in, stuff in Stranger Things. I see it on Twin Peaks. There's this movie Greyhound with Tom Hanks where it's like the special effects of, having dozens of battleships, not super great. It's a very low budget movie. And I mean, they don't even look great by like, lower standards, but you sort of accept it because the story is well told. And I think in the case with Flanagan and Dr. Sleep, I was fine with it because I was invested in the story at that point. I think for me, a bigger criticism of the movie, while we still are in that area, because I definitely have more positives than negatives with this movie, is that the kind of the nature, the expository nature of certain things, and also the quality, and probably another place where it pales most to Kubrick is just there's an elegance to the fact of nothing being explained and things just happening and you just go along with it. But when you introduce rules and you introduce all these kind of like, these sort of tenets of how things are supposed to happen in this world, then you start to question things more. I never question anything watching The Shining, as weird as it gets. It's a bunch of skeleton people. You're not going, oh, why is that? You just have accepted we are off the rails.
Yeah, like who cares at this point?
With something like this, there's more of a, there are certain things where you're like a little fuzzy on the rules, which wouldn't really matter, but because they set up the idea of different rules, then it becomes a little hazy.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
It ultimately isn't a big problem for me. It's just more of a thing I noticed about, like, the movie kind of has to explain itself because it's telling its story in a more conventional manner. It sounds like you felt the same way.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably one of my bigger negatives of the movie is that it does seem to introduce rules in a way that is like, well, I think it's interesting as in terms of the storytelling of it, and I think Flanagan does a good job of making it so that you're interested in the characters. But in terms of like, oh, we have to torture these kids because we get the steam, like some of these moments you get like, you're like, okay, wait, what? Like what? Like,
it gets like a little like Marvel-y kind of like.
Yes, yeah, exactly. In the same way that it's like, oh, we gotta get the Infinity Stones because we gotta go back in time. You're like. I
mean, I would say the thing with the children and the steam is not a big problem for me because that's kind of like almost the central conceit of the movie, and it's very consistent.
No. I'm just saying, like for as an example, like the fact that there are these sort of like somewhat arbitrary rules of this sort of like universe, it makes it feel a little bit more like Marvel movie. It makes it feel a little bit more like there's these, oh, we've got certain powers, like instead of the and again, it's difficult. I know we're kind of doing a compare and contrast, but it's difficult to talk about it in terms of The Shining because it's so antithetical to that idea of like having rules for the specific universe.
No, absolutely.
The Shining is very much interested in the idea that there's that almost anything can happen, and there's no real explanation for what you're seeing. It's more just you're just supposed to accept it, and I find that to be a much more pleasurable experience in that you can just accept it, and almost you could just turn your brain off and let your lizard brain and your emotional brain take over and be like, oh, this just feels right, like this just intuitively makes me enjoy this scene, or this just intuitively makes me
It turns off the party
scared, or
that questions anything.
exactly.
And that sort of dreamlike quality, I think Flanagan has to sacrifice for the way he's telling the story.
Yeah. And again, it
Oh, go ahead.
could be a problem with the source material, like not a problem necessarily.
Well,
but
King is notoriously messy in his storytelling and very
sure,
long-winded.
yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised.
I'm not saying it's bad necessarily, but it's just like these are explanations to things that happen in the world where the Shining just forgoes that idea entirely, and
a more realistic
visceral
world as well in the Doctor Sleep, which kind of makes supernatural things seem a little sillier. The question I wanted to ask you though, or hypothetical question, and this is not trying to be like a gotcha question or anything, because I'm sort of thinking about this too, is do you think you would have liked the movie more, or maybe I should say enjoyed the movie more, if it was the same story but divorced from The Shining entirely? Like if it was just, because I feel like if I was watching this just as a story about a person with, dealing with alcoholism and the trauma of childhood and dealing with these horrible vampiric forces in the world, without the kind of comparison and the homages and all the sort of baggage and the comparison that's inevitable to Kubrick, I think it would have been easier for me to completely enjoy the movie, which is kind of not fair, but I don't know. What do you think?
My initial gut feeling was to say yes, and then as you were talking, I started to kind of backfill in, like, oh well, why was I connected to certain things in the movie? And it was because of the sort of implicit relationship that you build through The Shining. So like, I think if you had just seen this movie sans any connection, I think there would have been a little bit more of a challenge to get connected into the world and get connected into the idea of these these particular forces. Like I'm thinking about the very beginning of the movie when so he has this experience as a kid where he's standing in the hallway and he sees the woman that you've known to you've come to know and love, and so like he sees that, and obviously there's an implicit connection with a Shining there, or I guess an explicit connection with the Shining there, but also there's meaning that's backed, or that the meaning of what what that signifies is backed by the power of the Shining, not in like an artificial way, but in a almost in like a normative way. Like it's there's something to the power that the Shining has that actually does carry over into seeing those early scenes of like,
well, some of the imagery, it actually, that I think that is true. I think I still would stand on my point that certain things are less distracting, or the comparison is detrimental to Flanagan. But I think you are right that while there are certain things where you just go, okay, you don't have, like, everyone knows the elevator thing, everyone knows the twin girls, but they're not super necessary to just do again just because they're things But there are things that I think are, like, I actually think it is like genuinely powerful when he's walking through the halls of the Overlook, just in that sort of quiet scene, and of course that walking into the bar, that do derive a lot of their power from your memory of those original scenes in The Shining.
And I would say that the entire everything basically with what's his name? What's the Dick Halloran?
Dick Halloran, yeah.
Everything with him basically is really important and special, but only because of the sort of information that from The Shining. So like there's no real there's no real reason. Like, let's say I was kind of thinking about, like, if you had watched this movie and you hadn't seen The Shining, like what would make sense in it. And basically the that whole plot line of Halloran it doesn't make sense at all if you haven't seen
That's
The
true.
Shining. And so, like, of course you could probably retcon that as a some school teacher or something like that, but it sort of wouldn't have the same effect that that connection does, because obviously there's some just seeing him on the park bench for the first time, it gives you kind of that rush in a way. There's the sense that like he's going to be sort of a guiding force in this movie in a way that you wouldn't if you was just a regular character, some sort of teacher. So
Yes,
I think there are certain things that are important with it. So I guess, I mean, like I said, intuitively, or my gut feeling when you first asked the question was to say, like, yeah, probably I would have enjoyed it more. But I'm not sure that I would have cared necessarily as much about what was happening. And so, like, I think that's actually pretty important, and he does a really good job of reestablishing your connection with both Danny as a character and sort of the world, and maybe some of the side characters, because you have that connection. So, like, I think I don't know. I think he actually, for certain important moments, he did a really good job of connecting this movie with The Shining. For other things, I think he did a bad job, and I think there's certainly criticism in, like, I don't know. I just don't think it's all that important to to have the elevator scene opening, and there's
that in particular was kind of just like a throwaway thing that could have been cut. By the way, this is completely well, not completely unrelated, but kind of just a random thought. Have you ever seen Ready Player One?
No, I haven't.
There's you got to see it just for the scene where they basically enter the Shining movie, and like Spielberg like recreates all these things, except like it's like a theme park ride where like they have the shot of the blood, but then it like sweeps them down the hall, and it's just it's absolutely ridiculous, but it's also really fun and delightful, and it's kind of just amusing to see Spielberg kind of pay homage to his hero and mentor. I don't know, it's just is an interesting thing, and I just thought of, we're talking about the blood coming out, I was thinking about that. It's a very silly moment in that movie. But I mean, the way we're talking about it, for anyone who hasn't seen Doctor Sleep, it may sound like this is a retread of the original movie, and I would give props a lot to this movie that it avoids doing what a lot of, or I would say a number of the kind of what you call soft reboots or legacy sequels have done, where you kind of just take the characters and they're older now, but it's kind of just a rehash of the original movie. I think the movie deserves a lot of props for the fact that it really isn't that at all. Like, it's a very, very different story in every way, and it covers different ground, and it's different in scope. And it's only just kind of in references at the beginning and ending of the movie where it treads that similar ground.
Yeah, I agree. I think this movie does a really good job of establishing its similarities as well as establishing its differences, as well as not being a sort of cookie cutter sequel in a way. Obviously, you couldn't have a cookie cutter sequel to this movie, I don't think. I mean, you could probably have a prequel. Actually, you could just do the same movie but with the other family.
With the which you mean in the family of the butler?
The dad who kills his twin daughters or
He
his
hacks them to
the two
pieces.
sisters. Yeah.
Yeah.
You could that would be just terrible and that would be the worst version
Oh God.
of sort of
You
a
just said that.
Shining
That's gonna
IP.
happen. I swear to God, in our lifetimes, that's gonna fucking happen.
Yeah,
Oh
it's
man.
terrible. Yeah, you make a prequel to The Shining. Oh God, yeah.
Someone's gonna, because that's exactly what they did with The Thing. Like they did the movie.
Yeah.
Oh, what happened with the Romanian crew? It's like, oh God, okay. But
Yeah, exactly.
it's just
In any case, yeah, I think the movie does a really good job of separating itself from not just the story of The Shining, but also like almost the world of The Shining, and planting its little feet in the ground in terms of like, no, this is the story that we're trying to tell, and it's going to be completely different from what came before, and so like, sure, the references and there's certain minor things that I think are in some ways pretty uninteresting, but for the most part I think it does a really good job of establishing its own connection with the audience, and establishing its own thrust of the narrative, and reason to root for the characters, and in some ways you kind of have an enjoyment of watching the bad guys. It's one of those movies where you feel like you're almost rooting for both sides. I don't want to say like you don't want the bad guys to succeed, obviously, but the fact that they're interesting and capable helps them. And
very compelling. I really think Rebecca Ferguson in this movie is just fantastic.
Yeah, I agree, and I almost wish I wish they have this whole like scene where everybody gets slaughtered on the bad guy team, and I think it's one of those moments where I'm like, damn, I really wish that this was like episode 6 of season 2 of The Walking Dead, where half of the people in the group die, and then a bunch of other people lick their wounds, but we're not at the finale yet, so the bad team is going to come back and come for them more. I just
guess
wish
it's
it was
a little easy, killing them.
Not just easy plot wise. I just mean like I think there's more interesting back and forth to that. Like if we're really gonna talk, typical storytelling, like that's the promise of the premise. Like that's the part where we have fun we have fun watching the good guys and the bad guys fight. So the fact that they get to just take pot shots at them from the woods is like, okay, like that's cool.
I really
like
that
but,
scene though. I mean, maybe
no, I'm not saying it's a bad
brow, but
I'm not saying it's a bad scene, and again, it's compelling for what it is, but in some ways I'm just like, I wish there was a little bit more there was like a little bit more to it, like maybe in a, again, this is why I think it really lends itself to being a longer story, is like maybe they have the ability to corner one guy, and they have to figure out what what works in killing it or whatever, like, and I guess part of it is also I've also been watching like The Boys, and that show does a lot to like establish this is a show that's got a bunch of superheroes, but in order to kill one of these guys, there's a certain set of rules, and you got to figure it out, and it's like a puzzle, and so like that is enjoyable in the sense that you like to watch both the good guys and the bad guys try to figure it out, and and so like there's a certain part of me that almost like wishes that was the same situation where you want Abra and Danny to sort of be in this sort of like hunting mode, as well as you want to see like, oh, are they gonna, is this group gonna set traps for them? And
Yeah,
what's
I mean, I remember being kind of surprised that they were just able to just shoot them and kill them, just because it
yeah,
seemed like
exactly.
they were more powerful than that. Um, but on the other hand, I don't know. I just love that scene because on one hand I was like, oh, it's that simple. We can just kill these guys. By the other hand, I'm like, oh, awesome, it's a shootout. I love it because it's just the simplicity of it. I just really liked, and I liked kind of the back and forth nature of the characters, the heroes and villains, kind of um having the upper hand on one another, and then beating the other person in this way, and then like turning the tables on the other person. Like there's much more of a sense of I guess like a evenness of a duel than again in the other movie where it's just kind of just running away for the whole movie.
Yeah.
Again, great because it's Kubrick, but in terms of storytelling, in terms of what compels me, like I'm more interested in this sort of thing of like who has the upper hand, and even remembering basically what happened, I was still just like riveted watching that whole sequence of events play out. And I think what was the other thing I was gonna say? Just the development of that group of I mean, can we just say it? I mean, they're basically pedophiles. I mean, at least that's the feeling I get watching it. I don't know if
Yeah,
you think,
yeah,
'cause to me it
totally.
reminded me of like these like you hear about these like pedophile rings or something like that, where it's like a group of people and there's this concerted, you know, it's not just one person, it's like this concerted effort. And that scene with Tremblay is like got to be up there with the most disturbing scenes I've ever seen in a movie,
Yeah,
because you get what he's going for in that scene. I mean, you get that this is not, the child rape subtext of that whole, and it really is just. I remember being surprised, like just watching this in the theater with like other like teenagers who are going just to see some scary movie, and just thinking like, oh my god, like I'm almost surprised this isn't just like a mainstream movie. It's very upsetting.
yeah, no. I totally agree, and I, in some ways, what's really funny, and maybe this is just me being glib, but in some ways, I almost was like, in that scene and in that moment, I was almost like, man, I kind of wish this was just a movie about a couple guys chasing down like a pedophile ring, because that's a fun concept. You know what I mean? I'd like, of course the extra stuff is kind of the, I don't want to say it's the point of the movie, but like it's the supernatural stuff is obviously the backdrop of what's going on here. But in some ways, and again, this could just be me being not that interested in like the supernatural. I'm more interested in the personal, like.
Well, that could be another kind of movie where it's like people using a supernatural ability to track down these people also. Like that,
Yeah, exactly.
just that aspect of this movie could have been its own movie without the exploration of his trauma and his character and alcoholism and all these other things. It's interesting you say that, because I feel like there are dozens of movies where I have said the same thing, or even and actually a lot of TV shows too, because TV shows, while they have the potential to flesh things out, oftentimes what happens is they have interesting things, and then they just have to build on lots and lots of other not interesting things.
They just fill it with shit.
Can you hear that I'm talking about Stranger Things here? Because like
Sure,
the second
yeah.
and third seasons of Stranger Things, they have like these great elements where like I don't know which one it was, but there was one where it was like the whole thing about kind of, it was like sort of 11 being brought into like their girls group, and it was sort of this coming of age thing, and she was using her powers to spy on the boys,
Yeah,
I was like,
terrible.
wow, this is a wonderful. No, I like that part of it.
Oh, sorry.
I thought that was great because I was just like, oh, I'd rather just watch a movie about this. I don't care about
Oh,
chasing down the
sorry. Are you
monster.
talking about when she's like they were, she goes off like by herself and then she meets all the other girls, the group of
No, but
superhero girls?
I was not talking about that. But
Oh, okay.
I actually
Okay. That's the
actually like
episode
that.
that I was. Oh,
Everyone
I
hates
hate
that one.
that episode.
I
It's
actually
terrible.
I thought that episode was good, but I think I'm the only person maybe in America who
I
thinks
think
this.
so. Yeah.
But no, I'm just talking about. I mean, there are many things like this. This is a very long-winded example, just to say if something where you watch it and you go, "Wow, this is like really interesting." I mean, I actually wish that show had just become about them. I don't know. I'm always more interested in a coming-of-age show than a science fiction horror show. So I just wish
Yeah.
that there were no more monsters after the first season because the first season just did it great. And but of course there has to be, and it has to be all this nonsense. And by the time that you're getting into like, the mother and the teenage boy relationship, you're just like, oh my god, like they really are just overstuffing this
Yeah.
show. And so I feel that with so many things, but oddly with this movie, I don't have that problem. I have the problem with I wish everything was fleshed out more.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I like
yeah,
all the disparate elements. I like the chase element. That part I just think is just thrilling and fabulously crafted. But I really think the stuff about Danny and his sort of inner life is really beautifully handled too. I mean, I think Ewan McGregor it's like one of his best performances this movie. I think he's astonishing in this movie.
No, I think he's fantastic. But I guess my problem isn't necessarily like how the supernatural stuff is handled, because I think it's done really well. And like you said, the sort of inner, almost like the inner reconciliation of Danny as this sort of savant who has suppressed his own his own powers and suppressed his own
demons,
his
like
own
just
talents.
as an alcoholic too.
Yeah, sure. I think all of that is really fantastic and really well done. So like I wouldn't want to take that away necessarily, and I think it's done really well. My only thing is I probably would find I would probably find a story about a a a guy, an unwitting guy and a savant teenage girl who are trying to track down a pedophile ring more interesting than this movie. So like,
I mean,
so
look,
like
I'm not against it. I mean, it sounds like David Fincher's next project.
Yeah, exactly. So like that's just where I'm coming from. It's not necessarily again, it's not to take away from what this movie does well. It's just well, I was kind of thinking during those moments. I was like, oh, I kind of wish that they just didn't have powers and that they were like just a group of fucked up people. Like I gotta just wish that they were that. Like I guess I would maybe relate to them more with less hesitation if it was. Well, I wouldn't say I'm gonna relate to a pedophile ring in any case, but
Careful now.
but I would be, maybe I'd be a little bit more scared actually. I'd be a little bit more disturbed, even though they're extremely disturbing in this movie.
Very disturbing. I mean, I think it's also interesting that I don't know. Maybe it's just I've seen those Mission Impossible movies so much, but there is something very inherently like charismatic and appealing about Rebecca Ferguson, and even like the some of the other people in that group. You sort of like when they're sneaking around, like following the blonde girl. You're kind of like you're curious about it. I guess that's before you really reveal what they're really doing. But it's not to say that you're sympathetic. It's just that it's interesting that you feel this sort of compelled by such awful people. And I don't know, that's just very interesting to me. And on top of that, when she just gets to play a great sort of, it's almost like a femme fatale kind of role, I think, in some ways.
It is.
And yeah, she's just so great. But What I was gonna say about about the thread of Danny and him, also like the idea of him not only like being able to improve his life, but it's like the confronting the past sort of metaphor works really nicely with the whole sequence at the hotel at the end, obviously.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, I was thinking about other, you know, because as critical as I am about a lot of these movies where you feel like they're rebooting or they're doing a sequel to some famous property just for the sake of it, there's been so many of them. There have been some really good ones, and I was thinking actually about the Train Spotting thing, which oddly enough actually also stars Ewan McGregor, where that one has a lot of references to the old movie and a lot of things where he throws in kind of little bits of memory as these characters come to terms with the past. And I think even some of the Star Wars movies, and actually the big one is Blade Runner. Maybe Blade Runner 2049 might be the best of those that I can think of. So like the return to a franchise or whatever you want to call it 30 years later. But I think that's just done really well in this movie. And Ewan McGregor I was just thinking about also, because I don't know if I want to say like we take him for granted, but he's never someone I think of as being anywhere close to an actor I really like or as a favorite actor in any way. But it's like, boy, how many great movies does he have to be in before I just admit that this guy is really terrific? You know, I don't know. I'm not sure what your favorite performance of his is, but
I think him in Train Spotting is just really, it's like, it's top tier. He's so raw in that movie, and it's just, it's unmatched. And I don't know, it's one of those. Oh yeah, we should. I would love to rewatch Train Spotting and Train Spotting 2. I mean, I haven't seen the second one, but
because I think he might be even better in the second one, as great as he is in the first one. And then Ghost Rider and Christopher Robin, and there's just so much stuff where he's really great. And I think the two scenes in particular is like the one where he goes home and he's got the bottle that he took from the dead father's house, the girl, and he's like about to drink, and then at the scene with the father, or Lloyd the bartender, I guess he calls himself, is really, as weird as it is, like you can't entirely get over just the weirdness of it's another guy playing iconic Jack Nicholson role. Do you know who the other guy is, by the way?
No, it was really disturbing.
Henry Thomas. It's the little boy from E.T.
Oh, that's
for some reason I guess is now a Flanagan regular. He's in everything he does, including, I've only seen one other movie that I'd highly recommend. It's also a Stephen King adaptation called Gerald's Game. It's a movie that takes place entirely, basically a woman is bound to a bed, like in a sort of like a sex game with her husband, and then the husband dies of a heart attack.
I think you've told me about this.
Yeah. It's seriously good, and also Bruce Greenwood's in that too, and Carol Stroiken, I'm not sure I pronounce his name, but the really tall old guy in Dr. Sleep is in a little role in that, and Henry Thomas is in it, and it's also a really excellent movie. But what was I saying initially about? Oh, so the scene in the bar, the whole thing with the casting new people. It's the thing about it is it's weird, but I 100% prefer it to any kind of thing that I feel like so many other people would do and probably will do in the future, which is to deep fake Jack Nicholson, deep fake Shelley Duvall, or I don't know, it's not technically deep faking what they did in Rogue One, but you know what I'm talking about. It's like trying to recreate the young version. I just think it's so awful. And in this case, it's just sort of like you just accept it and it's fine. He's the one who's probably the most different because he's not doing the voice. That's just kind of odd about it. Because he looks like him.
I actually really even in the scene where maybe it's the most blatant riff off in the movie where he looks into the door and he has the flashback of Shelley Duvall, screaming.
Oh yeah,
in the
the
corner.
cutaway is very unnecessary to me. It's not
But
Shelley Duvall; it's the other girl.
Yeah, but I actually thought that performance was really good and pretty much on point.
It's amazingly recreated, and actually, Alex Esso is like very, very close to Shelley Duvall. But I don't. But what I object to is like, do we need that cutaway?
No.
Of recreation? All the sort of recreations of the actual shots of The Shining, I feel like I could almost completely cut out.
Dislike.
We
I
know
also,
them, and it's just weird to see them like this.
I really disliked the sequence where Danny is walking up the stairs and she's kind of coming after him and mimicking the movements and in the way that I actually just didn't think it really made sense or was compelling in the narrative. Like I didn't really like I didn't really get why that homage needed to be there. And it was distracting. It took me out of the moment where they're supposed to be having this sort of this like almost their first confrontation with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I was taken out by the fact that it just, I don't know, it just was a completely unnecessary homage to the original. So
yeah, that's sort of it is sort of like a it's poetry, it rhymes kind of thing.
Exactly, yeah.
But oddly, that one wasn't a big bother to me. The one that was sort of weirder was recreating the office scene with Bruce Greenwood, because it's not the same place. That to me was more distracting because Bruce Greenwood is not in the same office.
Yeah.
And the tone of the scene and the meaning of the scene is not the same as completely the one in the original.
Yeah.
So that to me was more, it didn't bother me the first time I saw Dr. Sleep because I didn't even remember that scene.
Yeah.
But having seen it, I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of weird. Doing the stairs, it was not a big deal to me because they are in Overlook Hotel, and it's like, and also the dynamic between the character is not dissimilar to the dynamic between Shelley Duvall and Jack Nicholson. So less of an issue for me. I mean, in a way, maybe a lot of these sort of references are better without them, just because, as you say, they take you out of the movie. But for me, that one wasn't a problem.
Yeah, I would just say, I honestly, like, if the movie could have just done away with all of the what was the Star Wars movie where it was just like there's just a random cutaway shot to R2D2 and C3PO just like waving.
Rogue One.
You know what? It was. Yeah, right.
Of course, it was Rogue One.
Yeah. Well, and wasn't there another thing where the Ponda Baba and his friend were
also Rogue One.
walking, but yeah, like if there was definitely moments that really felt like that to me, where it was like it's just like it
almost made me wonder if like did they want him to put that in to make it more like, I don't know, marketable? I mean, that's
no,
I don't
honestly,
know that for sure,
I would say the almost his like faithfulness to both the King adaptation and the Kubrick adaptation probably lends me to believe that there were probably some things where he threw it in because he wanted to be he wanted to appease both crowds, I guess. So and I would almost say there's no I guess not that there's no reason for that, because obviously people put in fan service for a lot of different reasons, and plenty of movies have this affliction, but I think if you took out all of these things, all of these like not just the references, because I think there were some that are quite interesting and quite well done. Like I think The Lady in the Bathtub is a good example. Like there's something meaningful about that imagery, and we all kind of get it intuitively, even if we don't have the same idea about what the lady in the bathtub means. We all kind of have this intuitive knowledge, and he reinterprets it as sort of like the fear that you have when you're a kid, and so like
but also it's about facing your fear and not running
exactly.
from it, which I think is kind of what in many ways what ties all the different elements of the movie together, which is the idea of, I don't know, it's almost like part of being a compassionate and decent human being is being able to face that fear. In particular, it's very much about mortality. And I really sort of like the way these sort of things pair with each other, of his compassion towards these people who are dying, which is something I haven't talked about, but that whole thing, I really like those scenes in the senior
I
home.
love it, which again is another one of these examples where I'm like, oh, I just kind of wish that was like a movie, like regardless
like
of
an Irishman style movie, like of him just working at a senior home,
or not even that, but just like a story of a guy who a guy and his cat who follows around and sits with people as they're dying. Like, I think that could be a really, really interesting A24 movie. And,
or it's a little like Wings of Desire too, like someone who kind of watches over people, but can't do anything about it. Yeah. It's very, very touching. And, but even that, when you contrast that with these people who are committing these heinous acts of semi-pedophilia, all because of fear of death, all because they can't confront the inevitability of their death, I really like that sort of duality. And I don't know, maybe some people find it too obvious or whatever, though I feel like most people probably watch the movie and don't even notice, because most people don't think at all when they watch movies. But I like that part of the movie, and I like that there's a certain sense of him. I don't know, his transformation from the person of sort of ultimate selfishness. I mean, it's a very. I also just appreciate how dark it goes in that beginning of him, like him with that woman who's like lying in her own like throw up, and there's a baby.
It gave me vibes of Trainspotting again. I mean,
totally.
Very much, it seemed, I guess very similar to that.
Very reminiscent. That's true. Yeah, and that whole thing, and the sort of journey his character goes through, I don't know, to me it's very poignant, very powerful. And
the scariest part of that movie, which was the the dead body that he wakes up to in his bed, and it's her and she and the baby, which is
dead baby.
It's just terrifying. It's really horrible. And it's not just the most like visually scary, but also just like the fact that you probably know, and you kind of intuitively get that he's seeing these things because he has a certain connection to know, to what's actually happened. And so like, of course he's running away from his thoughts, and he's running away from his the demons that are in his mind, but he's also actually running away from this situation, and the bad things that have happened, that he's allowed to happen. So I find the even for a almost, I don't want to say it's like a naive movie necessarily, but it's a very like hopeful movie in a way that maybe might make me uncomfortable because I'm just not very hopeful usually, and I like movies that have a bit more of a cynical take on things. Even for that, I appreciate it because it really dives deep into the fucked up nature of humanity, and sort of the deep depravity that people have in them, and so it does do a good job of contrasting those two visions. Although
Yeah.
I think it puts itself squarely on the side of no, but we can just do it if only we try, which
Maybe. I don't
I
know.
just
I
don't.
don't know if I found it as like I don't know if I'd call it like hopeful in the same way. I guess it is hopeful because the ending is affirming of like goodness will be rewarded and that sort of thing. But I don't know, in many ways, and like many movies, other movies, I like Spielberg is another person where they have hopeful endings, but I think I don't find them to be naive because they have plunged you so deep and so close to absolute darkness that the movie makes you aware of it, even as it gives you kind of a ray of hope at the end. Which is odd because The Shining it's sort of funny how that it ends with them getting away. Like it ends the way you want it to end.
It
But
does.
the ultimate feeling of that movie is just like, oh God, like it's
deep depravity.
There's not any sense of hope, even with the quote unquote happy ending. By the way, we didn't talk about the last shot of The Shining. I fucking love that shit.
It's so good.
I don't know how to explain it or anything, but it doesn't matter. It's just great.
Well, and that's what I said in the podcast was I find that that ending so interesting because even though you have the sort of the typical happy ending, you almost don't care about that in the sense that there's something still deeply fucked up about this place and about their situation, so like there's again this goes kind of to the brilliance of Kubrick. He's pointing not to the strict narrative of what's happening on the surface of the fact that they get away, but he's actually he's drawing your attention to the overarching theme that there's something way more sinister going on here that is
and then it will continue on. Like it has the feeling of the ending of like when Halloween ends and you see where Michael Myers' body was, it's now gone. It has that same feeling, except with even more unease because I just realized this right now that it does a very unusual thing, which is that you see them drive away in the distance, the mother and son, but you never see them like safe by themselves.
That's true. Actually, what I was reading was the European version has a scene where they're at like the police station and they're like, which is very strange. It's let me see if I can find this. Hold on.
That's bizarre. I mean, I don't. It's not like that would have destroyed the movie, and I don't think it's. I'm not saying him not showing them being safe is to say that they are not safe. Like I think in the text of the movie or in the diegetic world of the movie, they are. But it's all just about the feeling the movie gives you. Because if the movie had a shot of, even just if it had one close up of them in the car driving away, it would give you a little bit more sense of hopefulness.
Yeah.
But just the coldness of them driving away, it's really just 3 shots. Driving away, frozen Jack Nicholson, and then the push into the photograph is very, very haunting feeling. Yeah, it's strange. We've talked for quite a while about both movies, and I don't know. I've expressed a lot of things I like about Dr. Sleep. I feel like I failed to like it. If you were to listen to this conversation, I feel like it sounds like we're much more, or at least like it sounds like we're much more positive on The Shining, and I think you are in your case. But what is it? It's a less Dr. Sleep is. It's not. I don't want to say it's like a less defensible movie because it's not like X-Men Apocalypse or something that's like trashy, or Rise of Skywalker trashy that I just enjoy. Like I think this is like a seriously like really, really good, like I would say, with some tweaks, a borderline great movie. And certainly in terms of just me being like compelled in terms of watching it. You know, it's up there with anything last year. But I think it's like when, again, it's the thing of like when you introduce rules, when you introduce a sort of a reality to the movie, and also when you introduce a more conventional storytelling, it's much more easy to nitpick a movie. And I think Kubrick sort of avoids that completely. But I don't think that. But that's not to say that for me it exculpates that The Shining from being like not criticized or not a completely great movie. You know, like great on the level of, you know, the Kubrick movies I really love, like Paths of Glory or Doctor Strangelove. I think in some ways it's like when you're in the realm of just pure storytelling and not the kind of emotion and I don't know, when you your movie has more of its heart on its sleeve the way Flanagan I think does, you're opening yourself to a lot more kind of criticism. There's more criticism, an arsenal of criticism available against that movie that there isn't against movies. Even a movie like 2001. Like 2001 is a movie that I feel like very confident in my head in saying I don't even think it's a particularly good movie. But if I try to express it, I sound like a moron, you know. And the people who do like the movie, they sound very intelligent. But I still think I'm right. And I don't know. In some ways, maybe I am a moron. You know, like I've watched Richard Jewell more times than any movie this year. But well,
no. I guess the thing that you're trying to get at is that like the movie does a very good job of having you connected to the characters, having you connected to sort of the story that's going on. But you almost wish that there's something you could have a little bit more time with for the ideas to be fully fleshed out. At least that's what I kind of got from the movie. And there's
I do a little bit. I think you have more of that problem than I do because it didn't bother me immensely. I do agree that in a miniseries form, I think this could, you know, reach the level of something like, you know, Mindhunter or Twin Peaks or something like that. But I wasn't watching it and feeling like I had a lot of problems with it. I don't know. I think there's a certain way I watch things that as I've absorbed more movies over my life and absorbed more film culture, I've sort of come to realize that the things that I value in movies are maybe not the things that a lot of film people value. And I'm less sure if I'm just wrong or if these people are just pretentious. It could be some of both, I think, where I think, I don't know. For me, you can read an intellectual meaning into almost any movie. Even I think like The Piano is a movie that's like perfectly ripe for analysis, but I think it's a horrendous movie. And I mean, I don't know. You agree with me. I don't know if anyone else
terrible.
does, but I dislike that movie very much. But for me, with movies, what's a more difficult thing is to make something that actually like, I don't know. I feel like what's undervalued is what's something that compels you, something that moves you, and I don't know. But again, it's not to say that The Shining doesn't. The Shining doesn't emotionally move me at all, but it's utterly compelling. I mean, it's an utterly excellently made movie.
Yeah. Well, I would say it almost a and I hate to kind of use this term, but I mean it almost specifically. In almost a spiritual way, I think The Shining has a lot of force to it, you know, and almost and by spiritual I mean like the inexplicable, the it's not emotion, but it's almost the sort of like the lizard brain part of you is just
It taps into
so
something
activated.
subconscious, into
Yes,
something
yes.
kind of that is something you can't articulate in a literal way.
Yeah,
Um,
100%.
I
Now,
would agree. I think I would agree with that, and it does that more so than the other movie.
I will say I should get to bed pretty soon because I do gotta wake up. But
oh shit, yeah, we've spent a lot of
the
unfortunate amount of time talking about politics, but whatever.
I do want to read out what this last scene was. This mystery.
Oh, you
scene.
found it? Yes.
Well, apparently it's not the European cut I thought it was, but it was an alternate ending. And this is according to Screen Rant, so take it with a grain of salt. But the scene was set in a hospital after Jack's death and before the reveal of the photograph, and caught up with Wendy and Danny. The hotel's manager, Stuart Ullman, arrived to visit and explained that there was no evidence on the hotel to support Wendy's claims, and insisted on Wendy and Danny spending some time at his place in LA until they got their feet back on the ground. On his way out, Ullman turned around and gave Danny the same tennis ball that rolled out of the room at 237 when he was playing with his toys. And
Ooh,
then
that's creepy.
Yeah, that's I kind of think that's fun and a little bit like it's a little bit more like straightforwardly creepy, but I think that's kind of fun. And then the last shot is the same. With the picture frame.
I mean, I think he made the right move, but the tennis ball detail is kind of a chilling thing. But
yeah, I think it's like I said, I think it's fun, but a little bit more straightforward in the in the interpretation. It would like lend itself to,
he made the right move. I also don't really like those sort of things. Like I don't want to say the movie because it'd be spoiling a movie, but there's other movies that have that kind of ending where it's like, oh, everything is well at the end. And I'm just like, boring. Just end the movie. But anyway, in just closing, if anyone is listening to this, and I'm very sorry if you are. I think these are both movies. I feel like most people have seen The Shining, but I think, would you still say this is a movie worth seeing, right? Dr. Sleep?
Yeah, I think it's good. It's definitely a mild 7 for me. Mild to medium 7.
If we're doing ratings, I would say probably just like an 8. Like, yeah.
10 out of 10 favorite movie ever.
No, definitely not. But I think it's definitely something worth checking out, and it's interesting to look at in comparison, but it's also best sort of watched as its own thing, and it has to be approached on its own terms. Because if you're looking for something that's, another Kubrick movie, obviously you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, you're sorely disappointed.
But I think Flanagan is very talented, and I'm very curious to watch like The Haunting of Hill House. I'm very curious to watch because I've heard it covers some of the similar thematic ground, and obviously it's a 10-episode series. And Gerald's Game is really good. I'm curious to watch more of his work because I think
that actually makes me. I didn't know that Flanagan did Haunting of Hill House, but so that actually kind of makes me more interested in watching it.
Yeah, I think that's all for me. I've kept you long enough, Cameron.
Yeah, it was good talking to you.
All right, I'll talk to you later then, Cameron.
All right, have a good one.
All right, see ya.
Bye.